So, are you ready to start designing your API? Before you get started, let's go over some general best practices. We want to ensure you start off on the right foot, since there's nothing worse than revisiting a design after you've already started development. When starting a design, it is important to ask yourself, why are these APIs being implemented? APIs are created to serve a specific purpose, so don't lose sight of that. It is also very important to put yourself in the shoes of the app developer. Traditionally, services are thought of from an inside-out or exposure model. In this model, the complexity of the backend services are exposed to the app developer. You're basically just saying, here are my services, have fun figuring them out. We want to design our APIs from the outside in, or consumption model. In this model, we ask ourselves, if I was an app developer, what sort of API would I want to interact with? There's a good chance that all of us would say that a simple-to-use API that is easily understood is on the top of that list. So along those same lines, an API that is designed with the app developer in mind will lead to a wider adoption, but also reduce the time it takes for them to develop their applications. Makes sense, right? Easy-to-use APIs equals faster development time. Consistency in the interface language, in the environments that the app developer integrate with, and in the workflow are also very important to the concept of ease of use. Documentation is also very important. You don't want a 100-plus page document to send to an app developer and expect them to read the whole thing. We recommend the use of something like a developer portal to allow the app developer to interact with the API rather than just reading about it. So here are some tips for design. Spend your energy on the APIs that you can get direct feedback from. Your app developers can tell you better than anyone what they want out of an API. This feedback is essential as it ensures you don't waste time on building APIs that no one finds useful. Spend time thinking about resources. We like to say that nouns are good and verbs are bad when it comes to your APIs. Using nouns create a more consistent pattern in your API library, but we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Before jumping in and designing your API, take the time to see if an existing service already covers the majority of the requirements. This is particularly straightforward, as it's typically easier to modify an existing service than to create a new one from scratch. As a general best practice, you want to reuse assets as much as possible and not create duplicate services for the same piece of functionality. It will save you time and avoid headaches down the road. Don't worry about non-functional requirements during the design of an API. This may sound a little bit weird, but let's think about it. Does latency requirements have a factor into the design if ease of use is the direction we want to head towards? What about SLAs? All of these non-functional requirements can be resolved in a variety of different ways. Don't let it impact how your app developers interact with your API. Finally, as much as possible, avoid implementing anything custom. Like we mentioned earlier, reuse assets as much as possible, and this includes conventions and techniques. The app developer wants consistency, and a one-off implementation will just require more maintenance and cause more confusion in the long run. Have you ever been told a joke that required an explanation just because no one got it? An API is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's just not that good. API should be straightforward to the app developer. A well-designed API should be clear enough that an app developer can look at it and immediately know what it does. Once again, this brings back the concept of the consumption model, where we want to make the API as easy to understand as possible. If an API captures the customer's address, for example, call it for what it is. Don't use code words. The base URL is the most important design affordance for your API. A simple and intuitive base URL design will make your APIs easy to use. In general, you should keep your primary resources to 2 levels and keep plural nouns for collections. Also, go with concrete names over abstraction to make the API easier to understand for the app developer. Many RESTful APIs start with using a method-driven approach to URL design. These method-based URLs sometimes contain verbs, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end. For any resource that you model, you can never consider one object in isolation. If you start to use verbs, it can be a slippery slope, and soon you'll have a huge list of URLs and no consistent pattern, making it difficult for the developers to learn how to use those APIs. As a best practice, stick with the 4 primary HTTP verbs when managing CRUD operations. These are post, get, put, and delete. Use post when you are creating an entry, get when you are retrieving an entry, put when you are updating an entry, and delete when, yep, you guessed it, deleting an entry. We at Apogee feel that sticking with these 4 verbs should cover all the capabilities you need in your APIs. Finally, let's talk about query parameters. When it comes to the relationship between your resources, things can get very complex very quickly. As a result, your API paths may start to look confusing, such as the example shown. Instead, you may want to use query parameters to sweep that complexity behind the question mark symbol. Put yourself in the app developer's shoes and see which of the 2 examples shown here you would rather use when making an API call. So that's it. We hope you found these best practices useful and apply them to your API design. Remember to always approach your designs from the app developer's point of view. After all, your APIs will only be as good as the apps that use them.